Doing martial arts for most of my life. Many teachers tell their students the same thing. Standing shoulder width apart, toes pointing directly forward or feet parallel each other. When you stand like this, there is much less stability. How do I know there is much less stability? Well, I'm going to test. I'm actually going to ask my partner, Aina, to do me a favor and use the testing push to test my stability. And I'm going to stand like this with my feet parallel to each other, shoulder width apart. Do me a favor and push with the testing push. Notice how she pushes. First, the hand touches the body, the opposite foot forward, and then she just lifts the front foot up in the air so that she no longer supports her body with that leg. Gravity starts pulling her forward and she leans onto her hand, which will transfer the pressure into my body. Go ahead. Yeah, just like that. Let's do it again. I'm standing with my feet parallel to each other, and I'm standing strong. Oh crap, I'm not as strong as I thought I would be. So what's the solution? I'm gonna jump and land softly. Notice how my feet are not parallel to each other, maybe not even shoulder width apart. Okay, well go ahead and push. You're lifting your foot and nothing happens. I'm not going anywhere. Now, there is a way to trick someone who you're testing. You suddenly take the hand away and see if they were resisting or pushing back. Well, let's test it. If I am pushing back, like you start pushing and I push back, and you suddenly take the hand away, I would actually lose balance, throw myself off balance. I don't want that. I want to stand here, and when you're pushing, it's like nothing happens. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, very nice. Thank you. Now this is a simple test. One of several tests, but one of the most easily demonstrable tests of how the person is standing strong. Now, when the person is standing strong, it's a good likelihood that they are grounded. Like a tall building, for example. If the center mass of the building falls onto the center of the footprint of the building, that's going to be a stable, architecturally sound structure. If the center mass of the building doesn't fall on the center of its footprint, it's not going to be a very stable building. You lean on it, push it, and it will actually collapse, or will be on the verge of collapse. And a lot of people are on the verge of collapse, like that. We are tall structures, except we're standing on our feet. And just like those buildings, if we distribute weight on the center of the footprint, we become supremely stable and balanced. That is the principle of grounding. It's not only about the side-to-side distribution, but equally important also back and forth distribution between the toes and the heels. If I put too much weight on the toes of my feet, I'm starting to lean forward. That requires tension in the calves and hamstrings in my body, even in the muscles of the back, because those muscles are compensating for lack of structural integrity. If my bone structure is not supporting me when I lean onto bringing the weight onto my toes, something else has to compensate for that lack of structural integrity, and that is the musculature. The muscles are never as strong as bones, and they burn energy, and when they burn energy, we get tired, and then they get sore and stiff, and then they start becoming painful. So the tension in the muscles simply means we're not using bones properly. If there is chronic muscular tension, it means there is misalignment. And in this case, the simplest misalignment that we identify here is that there is too much weight on the toes of the feet. If there is too much weight on the toes, the calves, hamstrings holding tension, they create energy blockages. And also, of course, a lot of people complain about tension in the calves and hamstrings. Just because they feel like they're not flexible enough. Not flexible. They're tense. Nobody is doing this to us, we do it to ourselves. So we essentially create this unwittingly, and now we have the freedom of choice to keep doing that, or maybe to do something else. What else can we do? Well, some people try to overcompensate and they shift their weight onto the heels. When my weight is on my heels, my shins have to work super hard. The muscles in the front of the lower legs. Why? Because if I release the tension in the shins, I'm going to fall over on my butt. If I hold chronic tension in my shins, it's also likely to lead to a debilitating condition called shin splints. What's a shin splint? It's a condition of the muscle that is so overworked and underpaid that it goes into a spasm. That's an extreme example of an energy blockage. But even if it doesn't go into the spasm, the shin tension will prevent us from connecting with Mother Earth effectively. In other words, it will block the flow of Qi. So, the simple and elegant solution is to distribute weight on the centers of the feet. And I have a simple imaginary exercise for that. Imagining the soles of the feet are like suction cups, which works well if you apply pressure on the center of it. Because of the concave shape of the suction cup, the center of the suction cup may not even touch the surface you want it to stick to. But that's where the vacuum is created. That's where a connection is established when you apply pressure on the center of the suction cup. If you push on some other part of the suction cup, on one edge of it or another edge, usually it's not going to work so well. Why? Because that's not where the connection is created in the suction cup and the surface you stick to it. Well, same thing with the foot. The center of the foot, in Chinese medicine referred to as Yang Chuang point, allows you to connect with the surface you stand on, in this case the ground, and that's the principle of grounding. And if you use the image of the suction cup, you can simply relax the muscles of the feet, ankles, and legs, and feel how the bones are doing most of the work. That is exactly what gives you the sense of being grounded. It also gives a clear idea of how we're approaching the principle of embodiment and how this particular thing can help us with resilience. How does it help with resilience? Well, it makes us more connected to the ground. Energetically speaking, we are no longer just relying on our own personal power. We tap into a much greater resource. And those people who are more resourceful, by and large, are more resilient. So there is a simple meditation practice that enables us to enjoy this grounding practice in a matter of just a few minutes, becoming supremely more grounded. How do we do it? We start with a natural stance, jumping and landing softly. Then, with the eyes closed, imagine that you are a seaweed growing at the bottom of the ocean. As you're growing at the bottom of the ocean, you don't have to worry about all the waves and swells on the surface of the water. Here at the bottom, there are just gentle currents of water moving the body of the seaweed slowly and gently. Imagine your arms becoming like the blades of seagrass, animated by the currents of the water, relaxing and surrendering to these currents, feeling the flow and letting the flow move you. Well, that's the most direct way to experience being in the flow, isn't it? As your body is moving, it becomes a dynamic meditation. rather than just sitting still and meditating in a traditional way. I always prefer dynamic meditation because it allows the body to get involved. And in this case, the body becomes seaweed. Notice how the feet connected to the surface of the sea floor. And no matter how the body moves, the centers of the feet are like suction cups connecting you to the floor so that you maintain maximum stability and balance. Being like seaweed is pleasant and requires no tension. In fact, tension is frozen movement. If there is tension, movement becomes stifled. We can't move when we're tense. We cannot breathe when we're tense. Notice how breathing becomes easier, deeper and smoother as you relax and surrender to the flow of the imaginary currents on the bottom of the sea. We'll take one more minute to enjoy being a seaweed and still feeling connected to the ground that we're on, so that no matter how much the body moves, we're still grounded. Very well. Now, I'm going to test if it actually helped. I'm going to ask my partner, Anna, to do me a favor and push me using the testing push in the exact same way that you were doing before.
Yes.
Nice. Notice what's happening.
Yeah.
It's really not easy to push me over, is it?
No.
Am I tensing up or resisting?
No.
This is exactly it. When you are relaxed, you actually are impossible to push over. Who wants to be an easy pushover? I don't know a lot of people who want to be an easy pushover. We actually learn how to stop being a pushover. If you push over, it literally means that it's relatively easy to push you over. I take this definition seriously. I consider this a more effective test as compared to regular muscle testing. Why? Because muscle testing has two shortcomings. One is that there is an isolation of a particular muscle. For example, in this case, it would be a deltoid. And pushing the arm down eventually will tire it out. And tired muscle will start giving you erroneous results. So it becomes unreliable. Even more importantly, the person conducting the test sometimes pushes harder, sometimes lighter, and there is no way to standardize it. In other words, it makes it a very subjective test. Who wants to trust that kind of tests? Instead of the unreliable and subjective testing, we learn how to make it much more objective and much more reliable, and that's exactly what I call the testing push.